So hello, look, and thanks for joining us. Very excited to introduce you to this panel today. This is a panel of our Helpline and Redress Support Service. And we have some members of our leadership team here who are going to share their reflections on the service. So I'd like to introduce them firstly. Arlene, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Hi, everyone. So my name is Arlene, and I am the manager of the Helpline and the Redress programmes. It's really lovely to be with you today, and we're going to try our best to answer your questions that you've sent in, so thank you for that.
Yeah. And thanks to everyone who sent in questions. It's been really great, and we'll try as much as we can to answer as many as we can, but apologies if we don't get to all of them. Tony.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Tony and I'm the coordinator for the Helpline and Redress service, and like Arlene and Kathy and Hauke, would really like to be able to answer any questions you have today and hopefully can be useful to your questions and thoughts. Thank you.
And Hauke.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, my name's Hauke. I'm the senior counsellor on the Blue Knot Helpline team and really happy to be here to answer your questions today.
Thank you. So this service is the Blue Knot Helpline and Redress Support Service. And so we'll talk perhaps first about the helpline, and maybe let me just throw it open. If we could just describe what the helpline is and who calls the helpline, and how can we help them?
Okay.
If you'd like to kick off.
Cool. I can kick off that, but feel free to jump in, Tony and Hauke and Kathy, of course. And first of all, actually, I would like to say that if anything that we say today or anything that you hear is triggering, really would like to invite you to actually contact the helpline at Blue Knot. We do operate from 9 until 5, and our telephone number, which I should know by heart, but I'm afraid it's terrible with numbers, is 1300 657 380. We're open Monday to Sunday, so please give us a call. If you do need to call out of hours, there are additional services such as Lifeline, and also 1-800-RESPECT as well, Beyond Blue, obviously, to name a few as well. So who calls the helpline? Well, our callers are very diverse, first of all, so really mixed bunch of callers. Predominantly, we speak to adult survivors of childhood abuse, and that again, there's many kind of inferences of abuse as well. So we speak to people who have experienced neglect, periods of emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse and physical abuse from immediate family members or extended family members as well. We also support people who have experienced abuse within institutions. Again, predominantly that's from the Redress programme, which we'll go into in a little bit. Again, the diversity is reflected in gender, ages, ethnicities as well, backgrounds. We know that abuse and trauma doesn't affect one specific person, it really goes across the board. The type of support that you would receive, first and foremost, you will be believed, and that's really, really important for you to know that you will always be believed when you contact. You will be listened to, you will be heard, you will be respected. Your trauma journey will be respected and your story will be heard as well. You will be given time and given space in which to really speak at your own pace. And again, really the control and the choice of what you want to say is down to you as well. You will be supported by obviously an individual counsellor, but the helpline is staffed by a team of incredibly experienced and professional helpline counsellors and redress counsellors as well. I might throw that open to Tony and Helka as well to add anything else.
I thought what you said was really beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just to expand a little bit on callers as well, we also support people who've experienced other forms of childhood trauma. So people who've grown up with a parent, for example, who has a mental illness, or a parent who may use alcohol or drugs, or experienced, unfortunately, there are lots of ways people can experience, repeated trauma through childhood or as an adult.
Yeah.
And also we do get calls from family members, from other people. So Tony and Hilka, throw it open to you.
Yeah, that's right, Kathy. We do. I'd probably say the majority of our clients to the helpline are survivors themselves, but we do very frequently take calls from people who support survivors, whether they're family, friends, or other health professionals. And we understand that by supporting supporters, we also support the survivors through that. And that's all part of our work. And so all those people are very much welcome to call us. Yeah.
So Tony, I'm a survivor, and I'm ringing for the very first time, and it's been incredibly difficult for me to pick up the phone. I've tried to pick it up a number of times, and I've finally been able to ring through. What happens?
Well, first of all, we acknowledge and thank you for calling. We also just take a few moments, Kathy, to let you know the scope of the service. So to let you know about privacy and confidentiality, so that how we hold that with you. We let you know that we're also careful around letting you know what to talk about, so that we are mandatory reporters, that that we're a team-based service. So we let you know that we're having a conversation today, and that's a conversation together, and that you're welcome to call back again in the future. But if you did call back in the future, that you would be talking to one of the team that Arlene spoke about earlier, potentially, so that there would be other people you would speak with. So we spend a little bit of time talking about the scope, that we offer up to an hour a week where you can talk with a counsellor, and then, as I say, you can call back the following week. We would, and then open the door or open the space to you to talk about the fact that you did call in and what you would like to talk about right now. So there's no agenda. We don't have an agenda of what you need to talk about or how you need to talk. It's just time together as we share the space. And we have an hour to spend together, and however that unfolds, it just unfolds. And at the end of the time, as we come close to the end of the time, I let you know. I say, hey, Kathy, we've got 10 minutes left, and we talk about how you might go forward from the phone call. And that could be with referrals, or it could just be how you're going to look after yourself after the call. And reiterating that you can call us back, and talking about safety and making sure that you're going to be okay after the call. So it's about holding you in the call, letting you have that space, and looking forward after the call to making sure that you're okay after that as well. So that's the general makeup of the call.
And if I was to call again a few days later, would I get to speak to you?
Not necessarily, no. You'd just talk to whoever answered the phone, who would again be another trauma-informed person who would be able to respond in a very similar way. And each time you call, Kathy, it would be unique. So we would meet you today in that moment of how you are today. Yeah. So we don't go back and read the notes necessarily from your last call, but we would meet you today in this moment as you're calling today. And I think that's one of the gifts of our service, is that we say hello today and we spend that moment with you.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to note as well around the importance of the team-based service, that I suppose it can feel like maybe you have to repeat your reason for calling. I think one of the benefits, really, from what I hear from both the team and the callers, of having a team-based service, is that a person really kind of gets to engage in different levels of experience and knowledge from the team. Obviously, if you were to speak only with one person at a time, just consistently, you're kind of in a way missing out from the really vast wealth of knowledge, different backgrounds, different experiences the team hold as well.
Yeah, and I would probably add to that, that we always differentiate and explain to the first-time caller how we're different to long-term face-to-face therapy, for example, for which there's certainly absolutely a big space in the recovery journey. But so we meet you, as Tony and Arlene have said, on that day for that hour or so. But we would usually work in what's referred to as phase 1 work. So it's around safety, stability, helping you ground, looking at how you're coping in the here and now, and supporting you in that. We're certainly happy to listen to some of your story, but we wouldn't, go into details of the trauma, because that is not really a safe way to work on a helpline. So for that sort of work, we would recommend that you connect with a trauma therapist if you're not already engaged. And we have a referral database for trauma therapists all over Australia, so we can certainly facilitate contact for that if that's something someone would like.
And what if I don't feel comfortable in sharing my name? Would you still speak to me?
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't have to give your name. You can stay anonymous.
Yep, or you can give a pseudonym as well. So it's completely up to you what you choose.
Yeah, we're really mindful that for lots of reasons, callers might not feel safe or comfortable to share their identity, their name, and that is okay. We're really happy to work with that.
And you might notice we're already doing a team-based response here, where everybody's got a little bit different information to offer, and that's the beauty of team.
Yeah.
Very well put. I mean, I've heard that you're a trauma-informed service, and we hear that quite a bit, and I'm just not sure what trauma-informed means. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, well, we can maybe give a principle each if you want to. So, including yourself, Kathy. So one of the really important things for me about being trauma informed is choice. And I think for me, that's incredibly important, and something that we really implement in each call that we have with a person who contacts, or even you may have noticed in the emails that we send also. And again, that could be around the health professionals that Helka has mentioned before. We try and provide an array of different health professionals with different experiences, so that you can have a choice in who you want to speak to, and also be fully informed of who the health professionals are, what their backgrounds are, what their experiences are. It's incredibly important that we are transparent in how we work with you, and that's why, as Tony mentioned at the beginning, we speak about the services that we provide. And if obviously at any point that we had to make a mandatory report, that we say that at the very beginning, so it doesn't come as some kind of surprise at the end of the call.
What sorts of mandatory reports are you talking about? What sorts of mandatory reports are you talking about?
Yeah. So one, for instance, would be child protection. So if you were to say anything within the call relating to a child being at risk of harm, we are mandated to report that. Where possible, and we will do that with you. I think it's important to do it in a collaborative way. But that's one example, of mandatory reporting. Because obviously we're a child safe organisation, and therefore we have to report. Choice again can come in different ways within the call. So choice would be around, again, what you want to share and what you don't. You'll never be pressured by anyone in the team or anyone within the service to disclose something that you don't want to or you're not ready for. We will also never force any specific type of therapeutic intervention on you or say this is what you should do, this is what you need to do in order to recover from trauma. We would never say that. We would never take a directive role with you. We obviously have boundaries as a service, but we would never direct you into something. So I think choice is incredibly important. And that's one of the trauma-informed principles for me, which is incredibly important. But I'll maybe just pass that over to Helka.
Yeah, look, for me, trauma-informed is really about understanding problems, issues that people have, whether we call them mental health issues or clinical symptoms or whatever, to understand them in the context of someone having a history of childhood trauma. So historically, for way too long, people have been pathologized and kind of, really stigmatized as having a problem, having a personality disorder or whatever. But so very often when we look into the history and we find that there is childhood trauma, all these symptoms can really be renamed as trauma impacts. And so once we understand that, once we see it in the context of trauma, these symptoms, I feel like going like that, are often, much better understood as coping strategies. And so being trauma informed is really, seeing it through that lens and helping a survivor understand that and connect the dots, which can be a great relief for a lot of people because they have so often felt that they are the problem, that they are mad, that they are bad. So, that is a big step in being trauma informed. And then that really also leads us to what treatment is appropriate and what helps.
Tony, some of those other principles?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that. I think one of the ones for me is trustworthiness. Like that's a big one for me. And something that we offer with that is that I think we understand that as survivors, people have been through a lot and been through systems and been through diagnoses and been through a whole lot of different areas, like Helka's mentioned as well, where there's been a misunderstanding of trauma. And one of the things that we really work hard at is to offer a lens, to offer a way to see it perhaps in a more realistic way, and to be able to trust the words that and the work that we do, that we're very consistent in what we do and how we do it and in what we offer. So there's a sense of reliability and trustworthiness that comes with the work that we do here.
Yeah, and I think that's really reflected in, like, as you're kind of saying, Tony, around the fact that we will follow up. If we're going to obviously say that we're going to send referrals to you, or if we're going to give you a call back at a certain day, that will happen. It's incredibly important to be consistent around our practice. It's part of the trust. It's part of the transparency as well.
Yeah, and if we make a mistake or we're having problems, we've had a few problems with the line going home through COVID, like we're really transparent, and I think that's part of that whole the whole thing is kind of saying, this happens, and we're letting you know that we're not pretending it's not happening. And I think that builds trust and builds resilience and recovery and all of those things that we're talking about, because we're not afraid to say, hey, that happened. And
obviously, safety is really critical.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Many survivors have struggled to feel and be safe. How does the counselling team help people to feel safe when they call?
I guess one of the first things we offer is and Arlene started off with it, we believe and we listen. And we provide psychoeducation, so we talk about what's happening for the person, we talk around strategies, we deeply listen to what's happening so that we can really hear what's happening for you. And from that we can work, and we can work around safety, and we can talk safety at a really deep level, whatever that means for that person on that moment, in that moment. And sometimes that can be talking strategies around how do I get through today, and sometimes that can be deeper safety strategies around feeling safe inside yourself, and how to start to create that relationship of safety. Yeah, Helka?
Yeah.
Look, I would add, that our counselling team is really skilled at, assessing both external and internal safety. So external safety is always really important. So if there's any concerns, we would explore that with you. But importantly, internal safety is such a big issue for trauma survivors. And so we can help you to develop some skills to feel safe again when you're triggered. And a lot of callers call when they're triggered, when they have been triggered, and when they're in that, when their nervous system, has responded to those triggers. And so whether it's grounding or other strategies, we can talk you through that and help you, at least take the edge off, but hopefully settle more so that you can get on with your day.
Yeah, for some people, it's contacting so that they can breathe a little bit more easily, especially if they're having a significant reaction or a significant trauma response, which means that your nervous system is being impacted. And so for some people, they really need to call just to feel a bit more regulated again. And they receive that, or they get that from speaking to one of our counsellors, who the team are very skilled in co-regulation, which is a bit of a kind of, I suppose, academic term, but really what it means is calming down your nervous system. So allowing yourself to feel present, allowing yourself to feel grounded, and in control of your body, even if it's only for 10 minutes or 20 minutes of that call, and that's all you really get for that whole day. But it's having some sense of control around your trauma symptoms that are impacting on your body. So for some people, that's really important, just to be able to breathe.
Some callers have actually said that just getting hold of a counsellor at that moment has actually created that point of safety for the day. Yeah, so it's kind of like you were saying, Arlene, it's kind of given that anchor.
Yeah.
So we hear a lot about recovery.
Yes.
And healing. Can people really heal? And we had a question, one of the questions that was sent in, how long does recovery take?
Great question. It's a really important question. And yeah, unfortunately, there is not an easy answer. There's not a textbook answer around how long recovery will take. I think, for me, working with so many people over the years that I've been working in different countries around the world, of people who've experienced trauma, what I found is everyone's trauma experience and journey is incredibly different and very unique to them. And so therefore the time of how long it will take, and also what recovery looks like, is very different, depending on the person. Recovery for some people can be a sense of control. As I said just a minute ago, can be the ability to manage some of those trauma symptoms. So to be able to have control over some of the symptoms that you may feel. That could be flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks, shortness of breath. It could be a sense of detachment. Having control over those symptoms for some people is recovery. It's also potentially knowing that your memories of trauma will always potentially be with you. But more and more gradually every day, you'll start to have more control over that. Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily an easy answer, and I'm very sorry about that. I really wish there was. But I think that it's important to note that trauma is a unique thing, and it's a unique thing for each person, as is recovery.
Yeah, I would probably add to that, a lot of our callers share, that are a little bit down that path, share with us that, they feel they've largely recovered, but it's not like the trauma is not part of their life history anymore. It always will be, it'll always be there. But they feel they've come to a point in life where it doesn't dominate their everyday, where, as Arlene said, they're not feeling out of control. And, I guess we can talk about trauma memories having been processed, and in your mind and your body, that happened in the past and it's not happening right now, which is what it feels like when you've been triggered. And neuroplasticity, of course, was a great discovery. And with that knowledge now comes a lot of hope, even though we know that our brains are impacted when we're children, when we're experiencing trauma. We also know that our brains are constantly changing with experience. And so there absolutely is that hope for recovery.
Absolutely.
One of the questions that was sent in was from someone who I'll read a little bit of it. What do I say to myself as I enter my twilight years after a lifetime of trauma? What hope can I have at this point? Because I don't feel I've healed up till now. What can you say to someone who's older?
It's a hard one, isn't it? Because I think, I guess I wonder, like, as people have said, recovery is a difficult process, or it can be a different journey for everybody. And maybe it's about each day. What can each day be as we move into it? Is there a way of creating space or breadth in each day that has some peace in it, or has some movement in it, that's not dishonouring to what you've been through, and the fact that the trauma is still there, but there's also, as we're moving into our older years, that there's space for peace and hope, and a little bit of gentleness around that as well. I don't know if that answers it, but it's not pretending it can go away, because it can't go. It doesn't go away, but it's also having something there beside it. Yeah. Does that make any sense? Like, it's it's such a difficult space. Yeah. But I guess for me anyway, there's always the hope that there's a space also for something beside that. That there's a gentleness or a place for some peace, or moments of feeling less pain in that moment. Yeah. And certainly welcome you to call into the helpline, talk to the counsellors, and perhaps strategize some of that stuff out, or talk through some ways of creating those moments.
I think, important to know that many of our callers are in that age bracket. And, we work with everyone. And also, what comes to mind for me is just, the knowledge that, for example, people who came, who were part of the Royal Commission, that we know it took decades on average for survivors to come forward and to make a disclosure. That is the average. That is the more representative group, rather than, the younger people. So you're not alone. That's for sure.
And recovery is in having people around to support, isn't it? Like, it's not being, like you said, Hauke, it's not being alone. It's also knowing people are here to support and help.
And I suppose it's acknowledging the little steps.
Yes.
That recovery is not just linear.
Yeah.
Things will come and go, and there'll be days that are harder than others. But what are the little things that we can celebrate and enjoy and grasp and embrace?
Yes.
But
Yeah.
certainly, the research shows, and we know, a lot of people's stories are quite inspirational of them finding a place of meaning and hope and purpose. So
Yeah.
we know that it's absolutely possible.
Mm.
Not saying it's easy to achieve sometimes.
Yeah.
But it is possible.
Yeah. I've got some other questions here, so I'll just read one out.
Yeah.
I feel like most of my complex trauma comes from my parents' inability to show affection and emotion. Are there resources available to help people who've suffered emotional neglect?
Yes, there are. First of all, there are there are a lot of resources. Tony and I actually were just talking about that this morning around some of the books or the resources that we've enjoyed reading over the course of our kind of our working lives. One of which is Judith Herman's Trauma and Recovery. There's some really excellent chapters in that book around reconnecting with yourself and your identity, and establishing who you are, and reconnecting with others. There's also a really fantastic website. It's from the United Kingdom, but it's called Beacon House. It's BEACON. And it's really, really excellent. It focuses initially on something called childhood developmental trauma, which is when, as a child, if a child experiences prolonged periods of emotional, physical neglect, or, for instance, is also potentially in domestic violence situation or has experienced trauma in sustained trauma, in early childhood. Also, Babette Rothschild is fantastic. She's written a plethora of books, actually. There's also a lot on the internet around podcasts that she's done that you can download, and also YouTubes that you can watch as well. She speaks quite extensively also about relational trauma and also neglect. But sorry, Tony and Helka, I'll also let you jump in too.
Yeah, look, I just want to thank this person for asking that question, because so often emotional neglect is neglected, for want of a better way of saying it, and it's minimized perhaps in society, and even survivors themselves might feel like, should I be calling this helpline because I was never abused as such? But we know actually from research, and it's becoming more and more clear, that emotional neglect, particularly at an early age, is very damaging, because we're so dependent on our caregivers being there and attending to us. So it is certainly something that our team is very aware of, and that we're really happy to work with you around. And, other than the resources that Arlene just mentioned, I guess I would always recommend to consider trauma therapy in that, because we're really talking about attachment trauma here, and attachment trauma, can certainly be worked with a good trauma therapist in that space, and through having corrective experience, through being seen, noticed, those things that didn't happen for you when you were little, you can have that. You can catch up on that development that you missed out on. So again, there's hope there for that recovery, but a very important issue.
Definitely.
There's another question here, and that was a good segue. What is treatment? What is therapy?
Whatever works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's actually what is treatment. There's actually some excellent plug for you, Kathy. There's actually some excellent guidelines on the Blue Knot website around different treatment modalities as well, if anyone ever wants to have a read at that. Excellent publication. What is treatment and what's therapy? Well, for me, again, it's very subjective, but therapy for me is connection, is a point of connection, a point of being seen, of being heard, of being listened to. Also of receiving, hopefully helpful strategies or ways to manage some of the symptoms that you may be experiencing of trauma. One of the other things for me about, I suppose, about therapy and counselling is that that you know that you're not alone in what you're experiencing, and what you are experiencing is a normal response to trauma. And I think for me that's really, really important because trauma is isolating, abuse is isolating, and for me, therapy gives a point of connection, where what you are experiencing is normal, and is also understandable. For me, that's really, really important.
It needs to be helpful. So whatever you're experiencing in your treatment is actually helping you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, from what we know and international, you know, experts in working with complex trauma certainly have kind of agreed that a phased approach is really the best approach when working with complex trauma. So they generally speak about the 3 phases. The first one being safety and stability, which is what we mostly do on the helpline. The second one is trauma processing, and then the third one is called integration. So that is a safe way of working with complex trauma, and it's not always linear working through that. But within that, different trauma therapists will still use different modalities, different techniques, and there's a whole lot. And the recommendation is really to, if you can, go with a therapist who is trained in a whole number of modalities and who can tailor to what you respond to, because there is no silver bullet. There is no one treatment that will work, but it's really about trying, experimenting a bit and seeing what you respond to, but within that safe framework of the phased approach.
Yeah, and that you relationally connect to that person as well is really, really important. It's where you're going to develop that sense of safety, which again may take a long time or may not. But I think what's also important is that you're able to go at your own pace and you're able to control, you know, what you do in those sessions and who you decide to see and what you decide to do as well. Hey, Helga, can I ask you a question? Is that okay? Could you maybe go into a little bit more about what safety and stabilization means? I know we've dipped into safety, but when you speak about stabilization, what would that potentially look like on the helpline?
Yeah, so on the helpline, so it's you know, again, revisiting this idea of external and internal safety. External safety would come first if someone still has danger, actual real danger in their life, you know, in their environment, in their relationships. If there's ongoing abuse, domestic violence, anything like that, then that would have to be attended to first, because the recovery can't take place when someone still needs to be in survival mode. And it's realistic and functional to be in survival mode when there is a threat, when there is a real threat. So that would be attended to first. And that may involve things like talking about housing. Is that person homeless? You know, are they living in extreme financial hardship? So these things are important. So that'd be the external safety. And then internal safety, which, you know, probably we see more of on the helpline. That would be around, you know, people's emotional experience being triggered, feeling unsafe, but also feeling shame, all those trauma impacts that people struggle with. Issues around self-harm, a suicide risk, those are internal risks. So we work with all of these on the helpline, and we work collaboratively with the client around that, and using different techniques, you know, whether it's grounding, safety planning, you know, different self-care strategies. We have some on our website. We have some resources that we can share with clients. And we might do it in the moment on the phone, where we would take someone through some grounding to settle them, to bring them back to the here and now. So the internal safety is often around being triggered and experiencing a flashback, or feeling like you're right back there when the trauma happened.
So we've heard a lot about trauma in the body. I'm just wondering about what it means to have trauma stored in the body.
That's a really excellent question, and it's really interesting because it also looks at I suppose, the different ways in which people have received therapies over the years. And it goes back to your earlier question, or someone's earlier question, sorry, around, you know, what is therapy? And for many people, and for a very long time, therapy was just seen as one thing. So talk therapy. So you talk about your issues, your problems, and once you've spoken about all of it, talked exhaustively about all of it, you will then recover. And for some people, that just wasn't working. They still could feel their trauma. And in what, after, you know, many years of study and research, what researchers, or sorry, therapists such as Peter Levine, for one person in particular, again has written extensive kind of literature around trauma and the body. One particular book is called Waking the Tiger, is excellent. What people like Peter Levine found was that actually the trauma was stored in our body. So it hadn't been fully discharged, hadn't left the body through talking about it. And in fact, after early years of repeated trauma, repeated abuses, what Peter was finding was that an individual's nervous system had significantly changed over the years. So if you think about, there's a concept called window of tolerance, which basically, the way in which we are, the way in which we function every day, we're relatively regulated. So we are able to wake up, have a shower, whatever it is, go to our place of work, have a connection with someone, talk to someone, all of which we're able to kind of to function and to regulate. And what Peter Levine was finding was, for some people, that just wasn't possible. They would go about their daily routine, they would leave their house, and they would be triggered by something that could be a noise, smell, something visual, and their nervous system would go into complete reaction. So they would respond in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Even though externally there was nothing there was no danger present, but they would respond, and they would keep on, their body would keep on responding. And that trauma would be stored internally. And it would mean that even though the abuse for a person may have happened 20, 40, 50 years previously, that they were still reliving that trauma, because the trauma hadn't dissipated from their bodies, still really deeply held. So when we talk about trauma being internal and trauma being within your body, it's because it's still stored. And so there are certain ways, again, depending on what your survival mechanism is, whether that's fight, flight, freeze, there are different ways to try and dissipate the trauma experience that you're feeling. So Peter Levine spoke extensively about it, as did a person called Bessel van der Kolk, who has also, written some excellent books around trauma and around the way in which it's stored as well. And again, some different types of things that you can do, depending on what your trauma is, for how to try and release that from the body. But ultimately, when we talk about trauma being stored in the body, we're talking about the way in which we are reliving and our bodies reactivating, our brains are reactivating because we believe that the trauma is still happening currently. That's my take on it, but I'd be really interested to hear Tony's and Helka's as well.
Yeah, I guess it's, we are finding more that it's important to work with the body, and that there are limitations, as you say, Arlene, to what we can work on through our frontal cortex and our language, particularly if the trauma is early childhood and pre-verbal. So there are different somatic techniques and therapies, sensorimotor psychotherapy by Janina Fisher and Pat Ogden is one to look into. And as Arlene mentioned, Peter Levine, somatic experiencing. But there's also other techniques that you can try outside of therapy. You know, a lot of people have found things like yoga and Tai Chi helpful. Things like simply walking, swimming, drumming, cycling. You know, some people find martial arts very helpful. So there's things that you can do with your body that might well help and that you could try out. But again, it's not a, you know, one thing works for everyone. So it's about trying that. But importantly, there's more and more of a recognition now that it is good to partially involve the body in therapy and recovery. And not to always preference our intellect. You know, that's a bit of a cultural heritage that that we have as well, that we tend to want to just work with our mind rather than with our body. But that's an important knowledge that we have now.
Tony, do you want to add to that?
I think we've covered it really well for the space. And just wanting to again re-emphasize the importance of knowing it is part of recovery, I think, to work with the body and what's happening in our body, and doing that adds to our healing, and just to be open to that space as well.
Tony, I just wanted to ask you a slightly different question about coping strategies. And we hear a lot about the way survivors cope and the way people survive. Can you talk a bit about coping strategies and, you know, the purpose they serve, and how one may come to change them over time?
Yeah, I think people have coping strategies that they've taken on board throughout life that have helped them get through each day. And sometimes those coping strategies have been useful, or they have been useful when we first adopt them. And so I think we have to be grateful for them initially. But as time goes by, then perhaps not as useful as they have been traditionally. And it can be, and to be thinking, well, is this still working for me? And if it's not working for me, what do I need to change or do differently? So if I had a coping strategy, a really simple one, for example, of going to bed at and staying in bed all day, or not communicating with people, that may have been really useful at some stage, and we want to acknowledge that and thank it. But maybe today it's not as useful. And if it's not adding to my life today, do I need to change that strategy to something a little bit different that's going to add to my life? So strategies are about what's happening today, and is it helping me have the best life I can have in what I'm living through.
And how can you on the helpline help people to understand their strategies and to find perhaps different ways of being over time, and to be realistic about that?
Yeah. So if somebody is talking to us about a strategy that they're currently using, it would be to talk through what's the strategy doing for them right now? So how's it helping? How's it not helping? And is there an alternative way that we can step towards change around that? So really wanting to honour that it's, you know, we've adapted it for a reason. We've taken it on for a reason. And do we need to change it slightly to now? So again, using that collaboration and choice that we've talked about as key values to help somebody work towards another way of seeing it, if that's appropriate. Yeah. So, because I think when people start talking about their strategies, often it is saying, hey, I'd like to do it slightly differently, and how do I do that?
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. And how easy is it for people to change coping strategies?
Oh, it's not easy. So we don't want to pretend that it's easy, but we will absolutely be here to support that as a team, to say, hey, you know, again, we talked earlier about baby steps. It's baby steps. A little bit each day makes a difference. Yeah. And we're certainly here to support those little steps. Like leaps don't normally work. but little steps absolutely do work.
And I think what helps is because traditionally often these coping strategies, these trauma impacts have been looked at in a really negative way and really labeled as being dysfunctional, something to get rid of, something to be ashamed around. And that doesn't help. And it's sort of like, stop doing that, you know, and then you'll be fine. But the opposite is true, because these coping strategies, how crazy they might look or how bad they might look, are actually what's keeping the person going and helps them survive. So really to never aim to take away a coping strategy until there is a new, more healthy one that can replace that, that can do the same job. And that's really important. So people are often, rightly so, very hesitant to go into treatment because they feel their coping strategies will be demonized and taken away. So as Tony put so beautifully, to honor those and to be gentle around it, and look for better ways of managing.
And I think it's very important for survivors to understand that, you know, this all makes sense in, you know, given what's happened to them along life's journey, and to understand that, and for other people around them to also understand and, you know, be more accepting, more empathic, more compassionate, and, you know, provide the support that people need to, yeah, to help to build their resilience and to build a way forward. And that's what you guys all do so well on the helpline. So, you know, I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank all of you and, you know, the incredible counselling team for the support you give to people calling in every day, because it's quite incredible work, and we're always blown away by the testimonials that we do get from people who, you know, have had one call with the counsellor and for the very first time have felt listened to and heard. And I'm always, you know, profoundly moved that a single call can make such an incredible difference to someone's life. So, you know, a big thank you